focus on one of the most notorious non-releases of all time, Brian Wilson's record Smile. Not released until September 2004, the album was originally a Beach Boys album that was abandoned in 1967. The material was originally presented as a 2004 concert at Royal Festival Hall in London before being refined into a studio recording. All right, guys, we'll be lying in bed just like Brian Wilson did. You guys recognize that one?
Oh, we covering Bare Naked Ladies?
We are not. We are not.
I gotta look them up where they stand in best ever albums.
They're not even on the list.
I can tell you where they stand for me. One of the 10 worst bands in the world.
Is that
in
true?
My count.
They're one of your
yes,
they would be. Your 10?
Yes, they would be in my 10. I shouldn't say worst is not fair, because 10 least favorite bands in the world.
Right.
Yes, Bare Naked Ladies would easily be in that top 10. They might be top 5 for me in that category. Yep.
Their highest ranked album is Gordon from 1992, and it ranks number 881 in the 90s. So we are not coming close to covering the Bare Naked Ladies.
That sounds way too high. All right, well, not to pick on the Bare Naked Ladies. They seem like wonderful chaps, but yeah. But yes.
They put on a fun live show. I have seen them live a couple of times, and they do put on an entertaining show. I can say that.
Well, that line is apropos here, because this is the ultimate Enigma Brian Wilson album, isn't it? Smile. This was the album that was supposed to change pop music in 1967, and instead it's released in 2004. But like I said, this is Cold Listen Hot Takes, so we're not going to go deep in the research right here. We're going to go right into the hot take. You guys ready?
Yep.
I'm ready.
15 minutes on the clock. Matt, Brian Wilson Smile, thoughts?
I'm not a huge fan.
I thought I was going to be the only one.
No. I listened to this, and we're recording this after we covered Pet Sounds, right? And I think Josh and I were a little lukewarm on that. And I remember kind of complaining a little bit about the wall of sound, kind of echoey, production. Still recognizing, how much of a genius he really is, and just in terms of all the arranging and the harmonies and the structures. It's very pretty, but it's just I can't get down with this. I do think it's a little less wall of soundy.
Oh, for sure.
Because there's not there's still a lot of stuff going on, but there's not like the echoey kind of thing.
I think it's the modern production, right?
Yeah, because it's like 2004. Well, yeah. I mean, they still probably could have done the more wall of sound kind of deal. But I just I felt like I almost felt like I was listening to a bunch of people getting ready to do a show tune, like a musical, or like a Glee Club, kind of theater group that's kind of like ba-boo-dee ba-dee,
a cappella type
yes,
stuff.
Yeah, that type of stuff. And I think there's some stuff on here that I like. I was familiar with Heroes and Villains. I certainly was familiar with oh God, what's the big sound? So I'm losing track.
I don't know. Is there a single off this?
Yeah. What is it, John? What's the? Oh gosh. Anyway.
Yeah.
We're all drawing blanks here. I'll get it in a second. No, the second to last song is like a big hit. Oh man,
Good Vibrations.
Yes, Good Vibrations. Right.
Okay.
So,
okay. Okay. I wasn't sure where you were going.
I was trying to think of the name of the hit, but so that's on here. Although it's not the version from the Beach Boys. He re-recorded it. And I do like how they kind of there's some calling back, so you'll hear parts of Good Vibrations or Heroes and Villains peppered throughout different songs, which is kind of cool. I like that. And there's a lot of stuff going on here, a lot of different, he's pretty much using every musical instrument, and his voice still sounds really good. I think that for a dude that's, I don't know how old he was when he did this, but he's, he wasn't a young buck when this was recorded.
He would have been in his late 50s, early 60s, I think. 'Cause I think he's 78 now, and this was 04, so 17 years ago. So,
okay. Yeah. I mean, it's got to be, the stuff that he sings.
Yeah.
The stuff that he sings is not easy, right? Even for a young person to do. So he's clearly, it's produced well. I just don't think this is for me. I just don't think I'm a big Brian Wilson / Beatles or Beach Boys fan. And it seems like it's too much, and I think that this is something that I don't know. I feel like repeated listens would be helpful potentially, because he's picking up different things and listening to different instruments and different parts. I think that there's definitely things that you could hear on your 10th listen that you didn't hear on your first one. but I just don't know if I have the patience for it. I think I've heard this stuff enough. And while I think this is just going to be one of those situations where while I appreciate Brian Wilson's genius and all the stuff that he did, I don't feel this. This just seems like it's a little, it's weird. I don't want to say boring because I don't think it's boring, but I am not very interested in what he's doing here. And I wish I was, because again, I think that this is something that it should be up my alley, but for some reason I don't get down to it. So that's kind of my take.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I lost my smile on this one for sure. You can't consider this a Beach Boys album. And nor do I consider it a 60s album, despite maybe wanting it to be released in the 60s. It's definitely a 2004 album, but he is trying to recapture that Beach Boys sound and that feeling of however old he was back then when he originally wanted to release it. And it just sounds so misplaced, and I feel like that energy was some things are better left like buried, right? I'm not sure that like bringing Smile back from decades of wanting to make it added anything to the culture. It doesn't feel like some revelatory experience for me. It feels like Beach Boys Plus, or like Beach Boys Extreme, like everything that Pet Sounds was that made it good, but like too much of it to push it over the edge and make it like not hard to listen to, I guess. I'm trying to say I don't like that. It just sounds like a young man's album, and he is an old man by the time he makes this, or older. And even the backing singers, it seems like obviously they're trying to recreate that Beach Boys harmonies and vocals, and it's not there anymore. And I didn't get anything trying to like, it's like having some like older cover band try and cover the Beach Boys, or like the older Beach Boys trying to cover their younger selves. Like, it just doesn't work very well, in my opinion. Now, is this album sound like, the production on this album is fantastic. You can hear everything. It's layered exactly how the other Beach Boys albums were. You can see he is trying to throw everything in the kitchen sink in here and get it to work, but it's just too much for me. Examples of this would be like that song Vegetables, which I found kind of annoying, and just the sentiment was again silly. I some of the time that the album seemed silly to me. Or then on the next song you have like Slide Whistle in there, and I think there's like circus sounds in one of the songs, which
you
I hate
those.
Yeah, so you're really digging yourself a hole if you put circus sounds on an album for me. You gotta do something fantastic to get out of that. So while I appreciate Brian Wilson's perseverance to try and get this done, I just don't know if it was worth the effort, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm going to make it a triple threat there, because this didn't do really anything for me.
Oh man, I thought you were going to come in and tell us.
This is different than the Beach Boys' earlier work in Pet Sounds. It's as I think Josh really touched on something. It sounds like taking the concept of the Smile album and doing what you think it would be, but coming at it from a spot where so much in music and so much had changed in the 40 years that it just sounds anachronistic, but not in a good way. I would argue, Matt, that it would have benefited from the discipline of the Wall of Sound a little bit, because the tracks were boring to me in many ways. There were some, Surf's Up I enjoy any version of Good Vibrations. It's a wonderful song. I do like Heroes and Villains, and I've always liked that song. Yeah. But, Wind Chimes, I think, was the other song I liked. So there's 4, but there's 18 tracks, and there's, it's as was said, it's a Brian Wilson album, even more so than Pet Sounds was. And I don't know, it just didn't do anything. It kind of robbed a lot of the joy for me. I know it's a much more upbeat album lyrically, and it's sort of was celebrated as, you know, Brian Wilson's happy now, but it didn't, as a listener, it didn't really do anything for me. It became kind of like lightweight a little bit, and the stuff that made Pet Sounds so interesting as a coming of age album and kind of an optimistic album, but like with tension about growing older. You know, this was supposed to be the album that was after that, and yet it was released 40 years later after a coming of age album, and it just didn't resonate with me. I won't say it's a cash grab, but it because I know that it represents the end of an epic journey for Brian Wilson, so I don't want to take that away. But I definitely think this was sort of like critics trying to get on the train now in a way that maybe they didn't with Pet Sounds, you know what I mean? And sort of retroactively trying to do it. So I can't recommend this album. I thought it was kind of weak. I remember when it came out, the Beach Boys sort of all said, it's good that Brian's staying busy, but we listened to it and it's, you know.
Yeah.
And I remember at the time people got really angry at them. And as I was listening to this, I said, they weren't necessarily wrong on that. I feel the exact same. It's like, it's inferior. Oh,
go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
It's even inferior to the stuff in the 70s, which gets overlooked by the Beach Boys. And I think if I were telling somebody to look for lost Beach Boys stuff, it's right there in the 70s to look for. And I would way more highly recommend the Beach Boys stuff between like 1970 and 1974 than I would this.
So that's what I was going to kind of follow up on. John, do you think that if all things went according to plan and the Beach Boys and Brian Wilson they were able to do this album after Pet Sounds, maybe the production being a little different, maybe a little bit more Wallace soundy, do you think that would have changed your mind?
It's impossible to know, because what they ended up releasing, Smiley Smile, have you ever listened to that? I mean, we listened to Wild Honey, and Smiley Smile is considered the first of 3 straight DIY stripped down pop out. It sounds nothing like this in many ways.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys it would, if time presents itself, because I know we got a lot going, but like it is interesting to listen to that album and listen to this, because Smiley Smile was poorly received and sold poorly, but I get it. You know what I mean? It's kind of like Brian Wilson shot for the stars and kind of just it exhausted him, kind of. And Smiley Smile was sort of like, let me just get back to doing something that's a little bit more pleasant. And then, of course, Wild Honey was more, basically like, let me just make soul music that I like. So
yeah, I think of all and I wasn't even on the episode that you guys talked about Wild Honey, but just on one listen, because I did listen to that later, I think I would rather listen to that than either of these, than either Pet Sounds or this, you know. And not saying
I
that
would
it's
definitely
better.
listen to it more than Smile for sure.
Yeah.
I don't. But they're very different.
They
are
totally
different. Pet Sounds and Wild Honey.
No, they are. But
both.
I like the lower fi. I think I like the lower fi thing better. It's not saying I don't like things that are quote unquote overly produced or really complex. I really do like that, which is why I'm kind of find myself scratching my head a little bit here, because there's a lot of elements in here that I traditionally like, but there's something about it that I can't get down with that all that much. And like I said, there's plenty of things on Pet Sounds that I do like, but as far as being the number 2 album of all time or one of the best albums of the 60s, I just never saw it like that. But I agree with you, John. I appreciate and respect the fact that he came back and did this. And I think for all accounts, like Brian Wilson's supposedly like this really nice guy, and like, you know, he's had a hard life and, you know, had a hard upbringing as a kid. So, you know, I'm glad something like this exists, because I think that it does have the influence. I think that people do, like, you know, try to emulate him and his sound and what he's done, and I think that people have done excellent, you know, work with that type of focus. But it just as the purely saturated, you know, Brian Wilson kind of sound, it's just it doesn't really resonate with me as much as I would like.
And Pet Sounds is what gives you that. And I don't know if he needed to make a second thing, because I'll be honest, the statement he was trying to make was largely encapsulated by Pet Sounds. You know, I don't know if there needed to be a second Phil Spector inspired, super produced album. You know what I mean? And that's maybe why he hit the dead end, because what's the evolution from that?
Would you say that this is self-indulgent at all?
I hesitate to say self-indulgent because Brian Wilson doesn't strike me as. I mean, if it was
Yeah,
self-indulgent, he would have released
right?
it as a double album in the '80s next to Kokomo, and done a press tour. So it's hard for me to say it's self-indulgent. I think it's overwrought a little bit, but so was Pet Sounds. But I argued Pet Sounds was overwrought, but in a really good way.
Yeah.
Sergeant Pepper was overwrought, right? But worked.
Yeah.
So it's not so much that that's a bad thing necessarily. I just think my biggest takeaway for me was that it was kind of boring, which is not good.
Yeah, and that's a crazy, because I was thinking that, but I'm like, I don't know if I can. There's just so much stuff going. For an album to be boring and to have this much stuff going on is a really interesting juxtaposition.
It's how I feel about like every surf. Your boy, who I always mispronounce his name. We're going to do this. Sufjan Stevens. Yes, it's how I feel about his out. There's a lot of stuff. I represent the complexity, but it just sort of just. I have like no emotional attachment to it. It's just it exists as a complex thing I even, unpopular opinion, Matt, we won't go down this road, but there's even some Radiohead stuff that I feel that way about, that it's so clinical and complex, and it's like there's nothing that hooks me in, So yeah, but we'll be able to revisit that way down the road. But maybe that's So Josh, what are your end thoughts here? We got about a minute and a half left.
Yeah, I was hoping that it, like you said, it's not like this some long lost Beach Boys album that is finally resurfaced and there's like all these hits on here and it's like the Beach Boys you know and love. It's nothing like that. It's just like this project that maybe hung with Brian Wilson for a long time and it just wasn't what I was hoping for, or even expecting, really. I kind of got the idea of what the album was about, like, shortly less than halfway through. I was like, okay, I see what he's doing. There's just no catchy songs on here, despite like you guys said, there's so much going on. You would think that there would be something that would be like a hit or something, and there's not.
Can I bring something up real quick? We only have a minute left. I am never a fan of people trying to reinvent music that already happened, but have it treated as a serious thing in the context of its time. It's one thing to be a revivalist or like a throwback, but I can't take albums like that seriously as pressing, urgent contemporary works when they're doing stuff that's been trod before. Does that make sense? And that's a real pet peeve of mine. And this seems like we're throwing it back to what music is supposed to sound like. And it's like, that time has come. And when this releases in 2004, there's a lot of really interesting stuff out. But you almost feel like this was for the people that were like, I don't like rap music and I don't like electronic music. And, all the rock nowadays is just too tight and punk inspired, and I feel like this is an album for them, and that's great, but I can't like name those albums one of the top 2 or 3 albums. And it's kind of the argument I have with Rolling Stone sometimes, although not this Rolling Stone top 500, but in general, it's like they're still pressing the works of like 74-year-old Bob Dylan as like urgent contemporary stuff that outstrips contemporary stuff. And my take is always, when you reach that elder statesman period, it's an artistic thing, but you shouldn't be looking at 74-year-old Bob Dylan to it be the vanguard of what's new. You should always be looking, and I think the people who would say that are the David Bowies and Bob Dylans of the world and Paul McCartneys of the world. That they're the ones who are saying, look at the new stuff. It's really only the Beach Boys, unfortunately, fairly have gotten a rep of being a backwards looking group, and they haven't done themselves any favors, and this is a good example.
Well, it was ranked according to Best Ever Albums. It was 15 in 2004 and 121 in the 2000s. So
and out of curiosity, to end the segment right here, what was 14 and 16?
Give me 1 second.
Okay, I'm curious.
So 16 was an album by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds.
Okay.
I'm not even going to pronounce that. Number 14 was A Ghost Is Born by Wilco.
Oh.
Okay.
And 13 is Seven Swans by Sufjan Stevens, John.
Okay. Although I would argue that in 2004, Sufjan Stevens was a hell of a lot more where music was going than Brian
number
Wilson
12, John. Animal Collective, number 12. So all your favorites
a lot of my favorites, all back to back. I was hoping we'd get something like a Kanye album or something to maybe he
might be in the top.
Album, so,
he might be in the top 10, but
I just wanted
on there.
I just wanted a juxtaposition, right? You know what I mean, of where music.
Kanye's number 5. Kanye's 5.
All those albums are different than this album.
Yes, exactly. So So, and I'm the biggest Beach Boy apologist here, but I can't recommend this one.
Yeah.
I'll absolutely defend Pet Sounds against these other guys, but I can't defend this one. It's not the same. The moment had passed. If you like charming pop, sure, give it a listen. If you're a completist, give it a listen. But yeah, that's about it. The next